radio for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM.
Yeah, welcome listeners to another episode of Agile.FM, and today I have a guest I was really looking forward to having on this podcast for a long time, Yves Hanoulle from Belgium, from Ghent to be specific. Welcome to the podcast, Yves.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Jochen.
Well, you are a Agile coach. I'm an Agile coach. Does that make us peer coaches? Is that what peer coaching is? Because that's what your website is, and that's what you're focusing on in your career.
Yes, well, it's a very good question, because I like to, when I work, for example, trainings and workshops, I like to do it with two people, because my idea is that when you're with two, the chances are much bigger that the quality is higher. So if we would do a workshop together, we would do pair coaching. And I've done that with multiple people all around the world, even people that I've never met before, that we did maybe something like this, a 5 to 10 minute talk on Skype, maybe a little bit longer, to get to know each other, to know a little bit about what we're doing and how we're going to do it, and then do a workshop together. And one of the reasons why I like to do that is that I've seen multiple presentations from very, very good speakers, very good presenters that completely screwed it up for whatever reason. It could be that they had a hangover, could be that they just had a bad day, that they, that they had a bad night of sleep, whatever, and that they just don't do it well. And if you're with two, the chance that both of you have a bad day on the same day is already a lot lower, just statistically. But also you encourage each other a lot by adding comments. The big risks with people who've never worked together is that you want to add something. So I say something, and then you want to add something smart to it, and that we keep going over time. So that is a bigger risk. But one of the advantages is if I say something. So for example, I get a question from the audience and say, how would you do this? If I say, well, it depends, and you could do it this way, or you could do it that way, they will still pick one of my two ideas. If I say something and you say something completely different, they might think, oh, maybe there is a third way, and they might come up with their third better idea, which works better for them. And so that's one of the multiple ways how pairing with multiple people can help the audience.
That's an awesome idea, and I mean, you've been in this business for a long time, and everybody familiar with Agile concepts, I think, came at one point in their career across the topic of pair programming. So pair coaching, what you're saying is a technique not only to explore more options, more alternatives, but also, isn't it also learning between the coaches?
Oh yes, definitely. For me, one of the things I've noticed, there's multiple ways how people learn, but one of the ways I learn most is by doing. And it could be by doing it in a team or with a team, but also by doing a workshop on a certain topic. And of course, you learn a lot when you do it on your own, because then you completely have to do it on your own. But if you have someone else next to you who challenges you and who would take and then give you other ideas, it gives much more interaction. So you will definitely learn a lot. And actually, the learning helps also to sell it, because I've sometimes have clients that say, yeah, but two coaches, that's very expensive. Well, what I usually do then is say, okay, but you probably have someone internally that you want to learn this thing, and I can work together, I can pair up with this person, and I will learn about your company much quicker, because I need to learn about the company culture and other things, and about specifics about the company, and that person can learn from me from Agile. And in that sense, even there, where you have an expert and someone who's expert in a different level of different things, we both learn. So that works at that level as well.
That's a great point. And from a learning perspective, but also from reminding each other, like from a guilt perspective, what you're working on. Sometimes there is the danger of in coach to drift too much into the daily activities and stay out there because you have somebody who reminds you, hey, let's stay on the coaching level.
Yes, exactly. And for me, for example, if I think about how Scrum was designed, where you have a Scrum Master and a product owner, for me they're also kind of pair coaching because they have both different roles, but they encourage each other. They discuss, or they fight is maybe too strong as a word, but they interact with each other. And for me, it's looking for. They both want the same thing. They want a good result, but they focus on different aspects. A little bit like I could compare it with parents, because you have a so-called metaphorical mother role and a father role who are different. And I'm not talking about mothers and fathers. I'm specifically talking about mother role and father role. So it could be that a man takes on a mother role, but the mother role is typically caring about the child, and the father role is, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, is pushing the child outside the door. So basically making sure that he feels or she feels that she can stand on her own. And pair coaching does that in a different way as well. When you have two people, like you say, we both focus on two different things while still caring about the same thing.
Yeah, and it just reminds me in the work I'm doing, I wish I had a peer coach with me in some of my retrospectives, somebody who can not only spark a new idea or interest, but just to help me out while I'm facilitating and vice versa. So are you taking that concept also into retrospectives?
I think we've done it already in the past, sometimes with two coaches, but sometimes it can also be, this is something I got from Meike Mersch. I'm not sure if I pronounce her last name correctly, but she was at PSL, Problem Solving Leadership course with me. And there she invented something like an active observer. So that she was in one of the exercises, she was an observer, but she immediately, when she noticed things, she might announce them. Instead of just observing and then after the fact stating something, so you learn something, she said some things right in the middle while things were happening. And sometimes that is needed for people to do that, because when you have a bad habit and when you do something wrong, if people tell you 3 days after, you might say, yeah, but it's too late to learn something because you can't address it. And when there is an active observer, so that is something I've used a lot since then in retrospectives, for example. And you don't need a coach. Well, you don't need a professional coach. It could be just anyone. It could be anyone from the team that you just appoint to that role and say, what do you want to take on this? And it usually helps a lot if you give people inside a team such a role, because the hard part for them is that they cannot go into the content anymore, but they have to focus on the meta level, I would say. But that helps them a lot. Well, depends on if they're able to do that. But a lot of people I've seen pick things up at a higher level, and they start to understand their own team dynamics a little better if they do that.
Wow, awesome. And that's a very good idea, and I want to come back to paircoaching.net in a little bit later. But before we do that, I want to tell all the listeners of this podcast that in preparation for this podcast, you actually had to slow down a little bit. You had to slow down on your walking desk, because when we talked earlier, it was quite noisy. You were walking while talking, and then you slowed down for this podcast because of the noise level. But there's something to it you're very passionate about, and that's that walking desk. Whoever hasn't seen a walking desk, maybe you just want to give it like some of your insights, how that contributes and why that influences you so much.
Yes, so I think for a few years, I think 3 or 4 years, I read about a walking desk and how that influences us. And what I've learned is that the catchphrase is that sitting today is the new smoking. So basically, most people sit around 8 to 10 hours a day, and then we say, oh, but we go to gym for 1 or 2 hours a week and we think we're fine and we're moving. But our bodies are actually not made for that. Our bodies are made for moving, because it's only the last, I think, 40 to 50 years that we're sitting so much and that we have a sitting job. And if people go to 2 hours of gym a week, that would be like someone who smokes full time then say, well, but it's fine because I'm not smoking for 2 hours a week. We would think this is rubbish, but we say the same thing about gym these days. And so when I read more and more about that, I said, okay, when I design my new office, I really want to have a walking desk. And then I realized, hey, but we're in the process of building a new house. Instead of just preparing everything for a walking desk, why don't I just immediately buy it? Because otherwise I would be preparing for something and spending a lot of money on a new office that I have never even done. So the moment I realized that, I immediately I came home that night and I told my wife, this weekend I'm going to buy it. And so I bought a normal desk that goes up and down in an electronic way, so I can just push a button and it goes up and down. And then I put a normal treadmill below it, because in Belgium we could not find official walking desks. There are a few of them available in the States, but at that time none of them in Belgium. And right now I'm actually really happy that I did that, because the official walking desk, they have some preset speeds. And usually for me that's too slow, because the preset speed that they advise for walking desk is 1.6 kilometers, which is I think about a mile or something like that, an hour. And I'm already at 2 kilometers an hour at this moment. And the speed I was before was 4 kilometers an hour, which is very, very fast for a lot of people. But I have my walking desk since December 2012. And yeah, it's really, really, really helpful. Again, I'm still doing a lot of client work, so in the day I don't use it that much. But ever since I have it, I've noticed that I walk around much more, I move around much more. For example, I usually go by train to my client. Well, on the train station, I no longer sit still and stand still and be very annoyed that my train is late, but I just walk in large circles waiting for my train. And so I'm actually, if my train is late, it always makes me feel a little better, in the sense that, oh, now I have more time to move a little more, which changes everything. Before I would go as late as possible to my train because I don't like to wait for the train, and now it's like, oh, but if I go 5 minutes earlier, I will still move a little more. So there's less stress at every level.
So how do we need to picture like future sprint planning, like a spinning class where everybody just like feel fast forwarding? Yeah.
I don't know. I have been thinking a lot about that as well. How do you do that as teams? I think if you're not in remote teams, I think it's pretty hard. But I do what I did, and I think I even started that before I had my walking desk. But at a previous client, I did a lot of coaching conversations out walking. So there were actually a few people that when we did one-on-one coaching, that we went out, because there was a very specific building. It was a building that at the inside you had a large room. So there's a lot of stairs and a lot of room to walk. So we basically walked around the middle of the office. Because we were at, I think, at the first floor, and we could just walk around and see, and it was a very nice environment. So every time there was someone said, okay, can we have a coaching conversation, we just went outside and we walked. And it really helps if you walk while coaching, because you both look in the same direction, and that changes it completely. It's really, you're looking both into the future, into the thing where you're talking at. And we already know that from body language, if you're sitting across someone, it might feel much more against each other. And so they advise sit together in the same direction. Well, it works even better for me if you're walking in the same direction.
Well, you're also getting more oxygen, right? And
Exactly.
You're out, you're walking, and yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like there are some certain strolls. I mean, we're coming back to the speed here, like certain strolls, and you're just very active. It's an awesome idea, and maybe down the road, and we call the stand-up the the walk-in meeting, the 15-minute or
I
something
do know
like
that.
that.
I do know, I'm not sure where I read that, but I read about someone who had on top of I think it's actually in New York, on top of his building, so a high tower, there was actually a possibility to have a running course or something like that. And they had with Exco, I think they had meetings while walking or while running there. So I heard about that, but I'm not sure what company that was. I forgot that.
Sounds like a very luxurious environment in
Yeah, it
Switzerland.
was definitely that kind of company that had way too much money.
Yeah.
But at least they decided let's not have meetings with a table in the middle and expensive wood table, whatever. But they said, okay, let's do it outside, and then we'll have different kind of discussions. And apparently it works for them.
And maybe that's why they're so successful, right? So here's another topic: is Agile at home. Another one you're very passionate about. What do you mean by
Yes.
Agile at home? With a family?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. The example I can give is, for example, right now, I need to think. My 10-year-old son is he doesn't like to read much, and he has trouble reading for multiple things, multiple reasons. But one of the things so he has to do, what is it, a report about a book that he's reading. So I've created a burn-down chart and actually a cumulative flow diagram on the pages that he's read. So so at one point he said, I have time till the 28th of January to read it. So he calculated the number of pages, 103 pages, divided by the number of days that he could read, and he came up with a schedule that he thinks was possible to do it. And so I created a burn-down chart that you could see, okay, this is the ideal pace to read, a little more. It's not completely linear in the sense that on Friday and Saturday night he's reading more than on other days because he has more time. Mm-hmm. So it's a little strange line, but still it gives him an idea of is he going good or not. And then we created actually a cumulative flow diagram where it's not just the reading, but every time he's reading something, he's also writing it down a little bit. And because he has a very bad handwriting, I'm actually typing it out for him. So I've read so many pages, I've written down so many pages, you have written down so many pages, and so we can see that and how he's doing. And after 1 week, he comes back to me and says, well, I misunderstood my teacher, and instead of the 28th of January, we actually have 1 week less. So I could just adjust it, and he could see himself, oh, I need to read this much and that much. And where before he doesn't like reading, now he knows why he's reading, he sees it. Every time he has finished something, he comes up to me and says, oh, Daddy, would you update the charts? Because we just do it in Google Docs, and he can see it. So it's helping him, it's visualizing it. Mm-hmm. Something similar that we did years ago, we don't use it that often at home anymore, but we have hourglasses, so 15-minute hourglasses that I use a lot for stand-ups, but we also use them at home for getting dressed. So they had 15 minutes to get dressed, and of course when my daughter, for example, was 1 year old, I don't have to tell her you have 15 minutes to get dressed. No, I have to help a little bit, and but the boys were a little older, so there I could just say, this is the order in which you have to do it, and you have 15 minutes. And then the oldest one, I just say, you have 15 minutes, and you do whatever you do, but in 15 minutes I'm going down, and you have to going downstairs, and if you're ready, well, you join. If you're not ready, well, you stay up alone, and then it's less nice for you. But they had the visual, because I could say 15 minutes, but they didn't understand at the age of 1 or 5. They just didn't understand. But having an hourglass that you can visually see helps again. So it's very fast feedback on how they're doing.
Well, Yves, it's definitely a reminder for everybody who is doing Agile on a day-to-day in companies, building IT or any kind of projects using the Agile processes, that even if you come home, you can continue with it. You can do something with your family, vacation planning or whatever it is, or
And it helps to explain some of the things that we're doing at work, because I use a lot of agile games, and it's very difficult for my kids to understand, because they say, what, XP game, you're playing with balloons, or the leadership game, you're playing with Lego, is that work? And if you can then bring some other things back, they might understand a little more. So yeah, that is something that is good. There's actually a lot more people doing it. Henrik Nieberg has some very interesting blog post on how he's doing using Agile and Kanban to do a barbecue with 50 people, or how he's limiting the number of things they do for doing the dishes, and improving his everything, the course at home. It makes it so much nicer. I actually don't think I'm that far away, far ahead of people doing Agile at home. I think much more people are much better at it. But it's interesting to bring it back. Because why would, typically what I say when I work with other companies is that if you use your brain at home to do all these things, why don't you do it inside in the company? And I think Agile coaches should be reminded that, yeah, we do smart things at work. We should do the same things at home to help people as well.
Right. And often we don't, right? So it's like, oh my God, I just did 8 hours of that. And these are the same principles, right? So talking about these principles, I'm just curious. You've been, as I said earlier, you've been doing this for a while. And when the manifesto in 2001 was created, obviously generated a massive hype in the industry. A lot of processes, things were concerned about how to do it and helping with the implementation. But you generated a topic called Agile Mindset. What was the driving force behind that at an early stage like that?
I was really inspired by David Hussman when he invented or published his Dude's Law, where he says the value is Y over how, which he compares to Ohm's law, where he says that if your Y is 0, it doesn't matter how much effort you put in your how, because you will never grade much. And it's not that the how is unimportant, but it's that you should focus on the why. And for me, it also means focus first on why and make sure that people understand. I also think that we should focus on who, because it also matters who's in the team. But that is something that I see more and more companies doing. But the why a lot of people seems to forget that. We have, and even in our industry, what I've noticed a few years back is that we have so many books on how to do this and this methodology, that and this, that, but really, and all these books talk a little bit about why, but we didn't have, like 2-3 years back, we didn't have any book about the mindset, which I find very interesting. Of course, we do have the manifesto, which talks about that mindset, but for a lot of people, it's not enough. I know that now the Poppendieks have a book about the Agile mindset, which unfortunately I haven't read because I'm still reading 4 other books. But yes, for me, it's really important to have people think about that, because the Agile mindset is the mindset to be agile and not to do agile is really sometimes confusing. Because we at the same time want to talk about, yes, we can, we want to do it, but yes, we can doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about the long term. It still means that we have to balance a lot of these things. We still have to think about the end in mind, which is something that comes from Stephen Covey, to think, okay, what is it where we want to end up? But at the same time, we want to think about stop starting and start stopping. We don't want to do everything until the end. We do want to do everything till the end, but we don't want to start many new things. So we also want to think about the minimum viable product, which means a first set that we want to bring out. Even if we thought about other things, and if you do user story mapping, you think about the broad aspect, but you still want to focus on the first thing to get out. And so there's a lot of conflicts in the agile mindset. You still have to think about Yagni, which means you ain't gonna need it. And I have an interesting story about that, because a few years back I moved with my family from Belgium to Bordeaux to work there as an agile coach, and we took everything for our 5 people family in one truck, and the largest thing I could drive with my normal driving license. And I was really proud because we limited what we took with us. And then I saw a picture from a friend for 2 friends of ours who basically, okay, they didn't have kids, but they had everything to work over the full globe at 4 or 5 different locations for a year. They had in 4 or 5 bags, so they needed a lot less than we did. Right. I could use the excuse of, okay, we had kids and blah blah blah, but the truth is we took a lot of things with us to France that we never used. We even took a full television with us that we in the end couldn't use. So yeah, there's a lot of things that, and did we forget some things? Yes, but I'm not sure if we forgot less or than these 2 friends of mine who also forgot a few things, but they also didn't have to take that much. So because they went out on planes everywhere around the world, for them it would have been way more expensive to take more with them. Right. But it keeps reminding me of that, because every time I think, yes, this is the bare minimum, there is somebody who shows me, well, you can actually do it with less. And that is something to remind as a team, because every time we think, yeah, we can do it smaller, there's someone who proves that you can actually do it with less.
Yeah. While you were telling this story here, Yves, it's like it really came back to mind, like the whole tiny house movement here. Which sometimes is advocated. It's a very interesting part where you really move into very small houses as families, where you go through a very similar exercise about selecting what is essential, what's important for you, and it's obviously a family decision. Some would like the TV, some take it out.
Yes, it's interesting because in Bordeaux, it's for practical reasons we couldn't have a television, which is just basically because we trouble it's getting a connection. But in the end, I didn't miss it at all. My oldest son read a lot of books over there, and when he came back, basically television, they expected it again, and they watch a lot more television than they did before. So I'm not sure how the experiment worked out, but I do know that I'm convinced that it helped him reading much more. And I'm sad that my other 2 kids, who both lessened into reading, don't have that same experience. Of course, it's not just purely on this experiment. I know that he was already a good reader before, and they just have trouble reading at other levels. But still, I think they would have read more if there would not have been a device that they can turn on all the time. And so yeah, I think. I've lived 4 years of welfare, meaning I had 375 euros a month to survive on. That's basically not enough or not much. And I've learned that there's actually not much that I need to be happy. I spent the first year doing IT. So when I was going to college, I learned about IT without having a computer. I'm not saying it was easy, it was hard, but it was possible. Yeah. So I've learned that you can actually do it with a lot less, and that is something. And what I see also, if coming back to work, is that companies that have most money are not always the ones who have it easier. Sometimes it's smaller companies who don't have enough money, who are really, really good at making priorities. They don't have a choice, and because of that, they get further. And I see other companies that, what I would say, have way too much money. They cannot make priorities, and because of that, they're struggling because they think they can do everything. But that's just bullshit. Even Amazon or Google or Facebook, they still have more IDs than money. So even if they have a lot of money, they still have more things. So they need to prioritize and say, okay, what are we going to work on and what is critical to do these things. And that is for me also part of the agile mindset, to make
Awesome.
priorities and to learn to say no. Because I had a large discussion today with someone who just had a hard time saying no. I actually asked that person to repeat to me multiple times no, and it was almost impossible. But for me, if you can't say no, your yes just means nothing. And
No,
and
you
that
can't, yeah.
and that person in the role that he's doing had a hard time doing that, and because of that, making promises for the full company that people don't trust anymore. And
But it's
yeah,
it's an awesome example here. Even we said earlier on this podcast, this recording, that we would come back to pair coaching. I do want to use this opportunity here towards the end to come back, and I want to give you an opportunity to little shout out, because paircoaching.net is quite neglected, purposely neglected at this point, right?
yes. So a few years back, I used that to start some kind of public training company or training company that would focus on having workshops done in pairs, and the brand was invented for that. But that was in 2007, and more I realized that the brand for me is much more about pair coaching and not just about these workshops. And so a few years back, I said, I see so many people liking the idea, and I want to say on this as well. Although I make a lot of publicity, after that I found out that I actually wasn't the first who invented, or actually I thought my father invented the name when we worked together, but it turns out that Joshua Karyovsky is the one who's used it even way before us. But I make a lot of publicity. I gave away a lot of T-shirts and coffee mugs for promoting paircoaching.net. So when I realized that, and that the work, and I don't like to create a workshop company or a training company, so I stopped using it for that purpose. But I said it's really stupid to have a URL that is known to a lot of people, that a lot of people like the idea, and at the same time, a lot of people are looking for information for pair coaching. So I gave away the URL to the community, in the sense that whoever wants to help out in creating this, I want to support it and give away the URL. A lot of people loved it, but nobody had time, just like I have to admit as well. And so right now we had someone who was interested in helping out, but my idea and was to create a real a wiki community, so that a lot of people could adapt and change it, so that it's a lot more self-organizing. And the person who wanted to help out just doesn't know enough about wikis, and he tried out, and basically he came back to me about a week or 2 weeks ago and said, well, I just can't figure it out. So if you can find someone who can help me, or who want to take over to do it, because there's a few open wikis that we can use, but they all, or at least from what I understand, they all force us to have people logging in before they can do something. And I really want to open it up a lot more and see how we can do that. But so this is a request to people, whoever hearing this podcast, if they want to help out to do this, I would lovely. So they can contact me just at firstname@lastname.be, and then and we can figure it out how to make it, because I really would hope that the URL could go live again. And used at the community. Yes, so there's a lot of there are some podcasts, video casts with me on pair coaching. There's actually a lot more people doing it than just me, who have, I don't know, more or about the same number of experience than me, and I would love to group all that information, because it's really about having people working together. And I just gave a few examples, but I'm pretty sure that if you talk to 10 more people who are doing pair coaching, that they have even better ideas than I just gave now.
Awesome. And we're going to put also for everybody interested in connecting this, you can also go on Agile.FM, go to this episode here with Yves Hanoulle, and just click on that link and you get to his email. If you are interested in making a big difference here with paircoaching.net. Well, Eve, I do want to say I enjoyed really this conversation immensely here, and I'm sure if you enjoyed it as well, this would not be the last time you appear on Agile FM, and there's definitely a sequel to this kind of topic. There's a lot of things we could talk about. I do just want to say at the end of our podcast, we have recorded for a while. How many miles did you walk? A mile?
I didn't actually look. Wait, let me look at my route. It's almost 2 kilometers since I turned it on, and that's about 15 minutes ago. So,
okay, awesome. So a good mile.
Yes.
So for everybody, for everybody listening right now to this podcast, while you were maybe sitting in a car listening to this, or at home, you could have also walked a mile and listened to this podcast, like Yves did while he was recording. And I do want to say these kind of ideas who come into our new workplaces make a big difference, and many of these help and encourage agility. I'm so happy you brought those to surface, and just want to thank you, Yves, for taking your time.
You're welcome. I'm happy, and maybe I could say just a mile, because when walking, that we typically look at the number of steps. So of course this time it's past midnight, so it's a little bit difficult to see. But it's 19 after midnight in Belgium, and already since midnight I made 1,500 steps. And probably about the same before. I'm not sure exactly when we started, but yeah. So yesterday I did 15,788 steps, for example. Wow. So that's and they advise 10,000 steps a day. So ever since I have my walking desk, I do a lot more than just 10,000 steps a day. 15,000 is actually a bad day for me.
Oh boy, awesome. And also points out that you're a metric person, right? Yves, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Agile FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.